Hello and welcome to another what I hope to be soul-nourishing episode of Harvest Prosperity Podcast. I'm your host, Naomi Marsh, honored to walk with you on this incredible journey of self-discovery and empowerment. And today we're going to dive into a topic that resonates with the heart of what it means to really kind of be human, how we respond to challenges or adversities in real time. So it's real talk about our real reactions in real time. And so this is a subject that, it kind of touches everyone because at some point we all face unexpected hurdles that challenge, our sense of stability and control in the situation. But here's the beautiful truth about it. Within these challenges really lie the potential for profound transformation and growth within us. It's part of the process. And none of us are immune, I've had my fair share of, man, I could have handled that differently moments, And of course, I didn't discover that until after the fact, because I had time to process and reflect on the situation. But man, in the heat of the moment, in real time, we're reacting to these challenges. And, I love analogies. And this one I related to this scenario specifically. And I related it to like an auto reply email. I've been in technical support for many years, and we've set up all types of automated responses that, it'll automatically send out this prepared email to someone who fills out a form, and we call it a trigger. So this event is triggered and then it sends out the auto response. And so I, think about the word trigger in that scenario. It's triggering. This event is triggering, and the and vice versa. So it's very connected. And so this is exactly how our minds work. The trigger sends this auto response, which is our immediate reaction to situations, or overreaction in some cases. In therapy and coaching, we frequently talk about the significance that, the influence that our reactions can have over, our mental health and our emotional health, as well as our relationships. And, both therapy and coaching practices emphasize just how important it is to be self-aware, and stay mindful and choose our responses intentionally. So one of the reasons I love what I do is because my practice combines both therapy, behavioral instructions, and coaching, guidance and structure. So in these types of situations and sessions, we'll explore various strategies, to help the client to pause and reflect and choose their reaction with greater intention. And, through guided exercises and, all these thoughtful conversations, they eventually become more aware by learning how to identify the emotional triggers behind everything. And then they move forward, to develop healthier responses to those triggers through practice. And so that's kind of in a nutshell how it usually works in session. And so I'm giving you these tips and these tidbits of information because I want to share and bring to community, And so it's not going to have all of the details, but maybe it'll give you enough to where you can work on something right now. And that's really what my intention is here with sharing. So let's talk about, how do you practice your response if it's so automatic? You feel like you don't really have any control over it. Well, it's not easy. I'm going to tell you that. There's no instant gratification here. If that's what you're looking for, sorry, you may, I don't think you're going to find it. Everything that's worth it takes time and consistency, and we're retraining our brain. So of course it's a delicate situation. And so in the moments where you are intentionally working on yourself and practicing how to identify when you feel that reaction coming on, and then how you want to respond to the situation. This way, when a challenge comes up, when you would normally explode or overreact, you will have practiced for this, kind of like an actor preparing for a performance piece or an athlete training for a game. I recall when my youngest started theater, and practicing, lines over and over and over was huge around the house. We all knew the lines by the time the show was, by the time the performance date arrived. And, but this, what I found was that this amazing practice allowed this budding actor to really get it down on the inside, off book, as they said. And so by doing this, it becomes more natural. And this is the sweet spot. This is where, it becomes natural to you. It's down on the inside. That's what practice does, is it makes it, that's part of our reaction, and our responses, it's down on the inside. And so no one's asking you to be something that you're not, or to fake it. You have to truly want to change the way that you are responding for it to work. Otherwise, it's just words, and healing and evolving is truly an inside job. But with, community and connection, we can share our experiences and really cause that beautiful ripple effect. So let's take a moment to visualize. Think of a situation where you would lose your cool. Completely lose it instantly. Maybe someone, cut you off in traffic, or hit the back of your ankles with a grocery cart. Yeah, one of those. Someone telling you to calm down when you're already upset. Yeah, those reactions. The ones that really ignite and explode. Those are the ones I want you to just for a moment. Now, take a deep breath with me. Now I want you to imagine responding with calmness, intention, and clarity in that moment. Feel that sense of empowerment that comes from this confidence. Breathe into it, just allow it on the inside, knowing you choose how you respond. You have a choice to reprogram that reaction. And this practice of mindful response, it's like building a muscle. I related it earlier to, theater and learning lines and being off book, so to speak. But the more you engage in it, the stronger and more natural it becomes for you. So over time, you'll find that your reactions are less impulsive, right? And more thoughtful. So this leads to, outcomes that are really more beneficial for you and those around you. So eventually, the triggers aren't as easily accessible anymore. You learn how to pause. Take your time, process it. Even if it means saying out loud to someone in the situation, I need time to think on this, or I need time to process that. It's perfectly fine to take your time. It's such a misunderstanding that we don't have enough time. We have to, immediately give this our attention. And that's not accurate. So take your time. Here's an important point. When we encounter challenges, our initial reactions might be driven by some sort of instinct or emotion, right? From previous trauma or something like that. It's perfectly normal to feel shaken or overwhelmed in these situations. But by choosing to approach it with, this mindset that you're practicing, that's grounded in mindfulness and reflection, we transform our responses from something that we may regret into something that's empowering us in that moment. And when something goes sideways or unexpected, and it will, that's just the way life is, we tend to react from a place of overwhelm. Our emotions have taken the wheel. But here's the thing. When we take a moment to look inward and really get to know our own emotions and reactions, we tap into this super powerful tool for growth and true, authentic transformation from the inside out. It's all about the journey of self, from the baby stages of brand new awareness, like, oh, this is what's going on, and that's what that is. And into mindfulness, learning to respond thoughtfully and to love ourselves along the way, And no one is immune to this. No one is immune. We've all made mistakes reacting from a place of hurt or overwhelm, or maybe it was how you were raised. That's what you saw, people in your life, in your environment, going off on each other, reacting, overreacting. This is where self-compassion really lays the groundwork. So once you're aware, when you make a conscious effort, to do better, if you can work on your reaction, and I'm certain you'll have stronger relationships and more, peaceful life overall when you do this. But it's important to be aware of yourself and love yourself through it, because you're going to make mistakes. So, that's why I said this is where self-compassion, lays the groundwork. So it's very important to take care of yourself through any time you're learning something new and trying to practice it. And you know what? I mean, I know I'm always, the cheerleader of the group, but I know you have what it takes. I've seen it. I've done it myself. So you have what it takes. Just trust yourself and love yourself, even when you make a mistake, especially when you make a mistake. I'm always talking about the ripple effect. People notice when you do something right too. They notice when you're calm and collected in a situation that others would be losing their cool. People take notice of that. And if you have children, oh man, they look up to you. They'll notice too. And if there's any advice that I could give, to caretakers, parents, is, make sure you give your children time to reflect and respond too. Teach them young to evaluate how they're feeling, that it's okay to take time out to respond. And timeouts aren't just for kids either. We need them as adults too. Many times, raising my children, I took a time out, and the times when I was younger, and didn't really know any better, full of fire, I reacted in ways that I can't take back. And that makes my heart, it makes me sad, because this is, you can't take words once they've been spoken, they're out into the universe. You can't take it back. You could just make your changes moving forward. And this is where the healing starts. So we don't have to live in that regret of what we did wrong, because we didn't really know any better. But we can live in the truth of the moment is that I'm ready to do better. And that's where that healing starts. So when you realize your reaction stays with others, that also has a ripple effect, and not in a good way. So let's change that. Let's change that vibration. This subject is like deeply personal, and it's really sensitive for a lot of people because they carry a lot of feelings of guilt regarding their experiences and how their responses to situations have impacted their relationships and their lives overall. And sometimes when things don't go as planned, and it happens frequently, it can trigger this explosive response. this reaction in the heat of the moment. Your emotions can feel just overwhelming. And we react or overreact, more intense than the situation warrants. And unfortunately, this can, result in saying or doing things that we later regret. Once the emotional imbalance, kind of subsides, right? And the overwhelm is kind of calming down, and feelings, then the feelings of guilt and remorse start to show up to the party, Here's where the work comes in with that also. So you're aware you need to work on how you respond to certain situations. You need to work on it. So now you need to get to a place where you expand beyond that awareness. Move into it, explore it, discover it, what it feels like, and then prepare to move into the next step, mindfulness and practice and that mental discipline, so you can really make a change from the inside out. And I know you've probably heard the saying, life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we react to it. This is exactly what we're talking about here, and this perspective really invites us to shift our focus from external circumstances that are beyond our control to our internal resilience that is within our control. So you can't say, oh, well, I have no control over that. But you do, you just need to know how to practice. So let's talk about, steps that you can take to, kind of work on your response. First and foremost is the pause and reflect. When we're faced with something that's unexpected, a challenge, something that just comes out of nowhere, you need to be able to take a moment to pause. Super important. This brief pause, it allows you to gather your thoughts, take a deep breath, and approach the situation with a grounded, level head, rather than purely from a place of emotion. So pause and reflect is super important. The next is, of course, practicing mindfulness, which is what we're talking about. And when you engage in mindfulness exercises to ground yourself, to center yourself, this practice helps you remain, present in the moment. And it reduces the impulsive reactions. So this allows you to kind of, respond more thoughtfully. And the next is reframe the situation. So this means shift your perspective by viewing this, let's say this challenge as an opportunity for growth. So you can ask yourself something like, I do this all the time. What can I learn from this? Instead of saying why me or why moments, I say, what can I learn from this? And how can I, apply this moving forward? That's very helpful to reframe the situation. Then next is choose your response. So remember that this is your superpower. You can respond the way that you want to respond. You don't have to be in that reaction state and hold so much regret from it later on. So you have the power to choose your reaction. So when you do, you want to opt for responses that really align with your true self, your values, and they contribute to, your overall health. So make sure you're very intentional about how you're wanting to respond to the situation that's most healthy for you and most authentic to where your heart's aligned. And cultivate resilience. That's the last one. Number 5 is, by nurturing resilience in our life, we're really building the strength to navigate these surprises in a way that is, full of patience and kind of in grace, really. It involves developing coping strategies and, maintaining this, more of a positive mindset and this positive outlook. And so, I mean, and a lot of people don't really understand, how do you cultivate resilience? What does that really mean? And I'll get into that in just a moment. So let's just recap really quick. The steps to master your response. It's kind of like you're always going to be in training. You'll never really master it, but let's just call it that for right now. So you've got 5 steps. Pause and reflect. Number 1. Practice mindfulness. Number 2. Reframe the situation. Number 3. Choose your response. Number 4. And cultivate resilience is number 5. So let's talk about resilience a little bit, because I was asked really kind of the other day is, how do you cultivate resilience? They weren't really sure exactly what that was. And it was a great point to bring up, because not everybody knows what that means. So how do you cultivate resilience? Well, resilience is the ability to bounce back from challenges and adapt to life's, kind of changing landscape, so to speak. So when we say, cultivating resilience, it's not about avoiding, difficult times, because we can't do that. It's just, life is what it is, But it's about developing the mental, emotional, and physical strength to really navigate through them with grace and wisdom, that inner wisdom. And so, I have a few key strategies that might help you to build resilience if this is something that you are interested in. So first, it's about, embrace a growth mindset. And so think of a growth mindset as believing you can get better at stuff, like with some sort of effort and determination, you can get better. So instead of seeing challenges as these roadblocks, having a growth mindset will see them as chances to learn, chances to grow. And when you have this type of mindset, you're more open to new experiences and possibilities. So embrace, a growth mindset. That's what that means. Also, build strong relationships. Making connections with others is super important for bouncing back from tough times. And surround yourself with people who are supportive and understanding, and they can offer encouragement and a different perspective when things get rough. So having a network of positive relationships help you feel less alone and more grounded. And prioritizing self-care, looking after your physical, mental, emotional health is important for staying resilient. And make sure you're sleeping well. Not just eating well, and a balanced diet is really good. Getting exercises, but sleeping well is very important. And if you need help with that, you can try mindfulness, meditation, keeping your mind balanced and your stress levels down. So prioritize your self-care and practice gratitude. Focusing on what you're thankful for. This is a remedy for just about any imbalance we have. I mean, it changes everything. And so gratitude shifts your mindset from feeling like there's not enough, to feeling more abundant with overflow. So regularly, acknowledging the good things in your life, especially when times are tough, can help you stay optimistic and, boost your emotional resilience. And it's easy to do this when things are going good, right? But you want to make sure that, especially when things are a little rough, that you practice gratitude. And create a list for yourself or a journal that you can read over whenever you need to. It's the wonderful way to get to something that you need in a pinch, Having that already in place is a great idea. Develop problem-solving skills. I mean, we really don't think about this until we need it. But if you're improving your ability to handle challenges in real time, by sharpening your problem skills, you can break down problems into smaller pieces, like come up with possible solutions and weigh the pros and cons of each one of them. This way you feel more in control and confident when you're tackling those difficulties. So problem solving is really important. And set realistic goals for yourself. That's really important. It's great to have these, apple pie in the sky hopes. And I love that. But make sure that you're setting realistic goals for yourself that you can actually achieve. And because it gives you direction and purpose. So goals are super important. And, it keeps you motivated and focused. And even if you hit a few bumps along the way, you can start, taking a moment to, take a nice deep breath before responding. A simple, easy way to start. That's a perfect goal to start with. Okay, well, since I can't really work all the way on my response system right now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on taking a step back and taking a deep breath when I feel, when I'm with an unexpected challenge in front of me. So set realistic goals for yourself, and that's a good one to start with. Learn from your past mistakes. Think back to times when you overcame challenges or adapted to changes. You considered what worked well and what didn't. Learning from our past helps us develop better strategies for future situations. And that's super important, because otherwise we're going to keep going around in circles. So it's important to learn from your past experiences and embrace optimism. Optimism doesn't mean ignoring your problems. You can't just think positive your way out of things. You got to put in the work. But it's about keeping a hopeful outlook, and believing that you can have these challenges and you can overcome them because you have before. You are resilient. You've overcame many challenges before, I'm sure, in your life. So when you focus on positive outcomes and you embrace optimism, you're embracing endless possibilities, really. So you build a resilient mindset that's really open to growth and change in a positive and healthy way. Next is flexibility. Flexibility is a flex. Honestly, like being flexible in your thinking and actions, man, that's going to improve so many relationships in your life because it makes it easier for you to adapt to new situations. And the one constant thing we can count on in life is change. So you need to be adaptable. You need to be able to be movable. Practice letting go of, rigid expectations, and be open to trying new approaches and new things and actively listening. This adaptability is really key for handling a lot of unpredictable twists and turns in life. So flexibility is definitely a flex. And the last one, which I feel like is really important, it really shouldn't be last on the list, but we all need support from time to time. So if you're finding it tough to build resilience or to really have a full understanding on your own, consider reaching out. Watch YouTube videos, listen to different podcasts, consider reaching out to a therapist or a coach. There's nothing wrong for asking for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help, and professional guidance can offer a valuable, insight that you may not, even know exists, and tools that help you strengthen your resilience, to tackle these challenges that come up. So this is the heart actually of my practice. So, if you're interested in one-on-one coaching with me, reach out for a consultation. You can just go to harvestprosperity.com. So next, I want to kind of move into an empowerment exercise. I'd like to share this empowerment exercise with you. The goal of this is to kind of help you nurture this state of awareness, and confidence within yourself in navigating unexpected situations so that you can work on your response and your reaction. So I'm going to ask you to find a quiet space where you can relax without distraction. This could be your cozy little nook or your corner. It could be outside, in the garden, at home, any place you feel peaceful. Okay, so now I want you to reflect on your reactions. Think about a recent situation where you were faced with an unexpected challenge and reflect on how you reacted. What emotions were present in that moment. Consider if your response was aligned with your heart. your intention? Is this how you'd like to respond to that situation in the future? Next, I want you to identify the triggers. Write down any common triggers that lead to impulsive reactions for you. Understanding these triggers will help you to recognize them early and prepare a more thoughtful response for yourself. Next, visualize your empowered response. I want you to close your eyes and visualize yourself facing a similar challenge. Imagine responding calmly and confidently. Picture yourself using positive language and maintaining a composed demeanor. Very calm, very confident. Feel this empowerment that comes with this controlled response. Allow it to just wash over you, absorb into your being, calm and confident. Now, let's affirm your strength. I am calm and grounded in the face of life's surprises. I choose my response with wisdom and grace. I am empowered to handle any situation that comes my way with confidence. My reactions are a reflection of my inner peace and strength. I trust myself to navigate life's challenges with resilience. Every experience is an opportunity for growth and learning. I am in control of my emotions and choose to respond thoughtfully and with intention. With each mindful breath, I invite clarity and calm into my life. I always like to encourage you to create your own affirmations. And these are just a few examples I wanted to share with you. It's important to write them down as well so you can refer back to them. It's always nice. So next is practice mindful breathing. And this is something you want to practice, this breathing technique, whenever possible so that you can have, easy access to it when you need it in a moment to regulate yourself. So this practice grounds you and, it also helps reduce impulsive reactions. So if something sets you off, this is your go-to. So we're going to engage in a few minutes of mindful breathing. I love box breathing. It's easy to remember. 4-4-4-4. You inhale 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, exhale 4 seconds, and hold 4 seconds, and repeat. So let's do this together. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Repeat if needed. You want to get this one down on the inside. It's one of my favorites. I'll do it while I'm waiting in line if I'm feeling stressed or rushed. Just immediately regulates me. So, and there's plenty of breathing exercises out there. This is just one of my favorites because it was easy to remember and it actually worked for me. So So next is a journal exercise, and this one's going to help you to craft your response plan, for yourself. So it's just a simple plan for handling challenges. And I want you to include steps like pausing, breathing, and even removing yourself altogether from the situation if necessary. And keep this plan handy for yourself. You want to revisit it. So for quick reference, and that way when surprises occur, you have immediate access to it. And you can also include your family and friends in your plan. Open a conversation by letting them know that you're working on how you're responding to situations. It may be helpful for you to express that, and that way they know if you need to take a moment when you feel overwhelmed, they understand that you're working on yourself. And that's important. So communicate before these challenges occur so that everyone's on the same page. It's a great way to self-regulate. And kids love this practice too. So encourage them to do the same thing, And make sure like I said, you regularly visit your response plan and these affirmations so that you're reinforcing this empowered approach to your self-healing. And with practice, I know you'll find that your relationships, yourself, they're all going to be, these turning into these wonderful opportunities of growth for you. And you'll start noticing things in your life really having this ripple effect. And by working on how we respond, reprogramming ourselves, we're creating space for self-healing, even breaking generations that, may have responded the same way. So this can be extremely liberating. I know it was for my own personal journey, and it still is, because it helped me recognize that it's okay to take my time and process. Not everything needed my immediate attention or energy. I first worked on boundaries because I had no idea how or what healthy boundaries really meant growing up. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. How can we help someone else become aware that their response or reaction to certain situations are making you feel uncomfortable? How can I set a healthy boundary in this scenario with somebody else? So I could give an example of, maybe a situation where a spouse, has road rage and it really stresses you out. So you need to communicate, hey, when you respond this way, it stresses me out and I shut down or whatever happens. So communication is really important. And so this is where, kind of these healthy boundaries would take place. And so for me, this was healthy boundaries, in real life. My experiences growing up were that, speaking up for myself meant confrontation. If I said, hey, this is bothering me, it was as if voicing my thoughts or my feelings or emotions would lead to a fight. And that was something I would avoid confrontation. I saw it. I grew up around it. I really didn't want it. There was a short period of my time when I, tried to ignore it and tried to be part of the crowd and, allowed that fire to ignite. But that's really not a place for me. I choose a peaceful life. And so I'm not out there trying to pick fights and, cause drama. So over time, I realized that this belief was not serving me well at all. The belief that if I voiced my opinion, then that's going to, be a fight. And so instead of allowing me to express my needs and my feelings, it kept me in this cycle of silence and compliance, with certain relationships, often at the expense of my own health. It's really not healthy to hold it in when something's hurting you and bothering you and someone continues to do it over and over. So as I embraced my own resilience and desire to grow and learn, this understanding was a turning point for me. Embracing the idea that speaking up doesn't have to mean conflict. It can be an opportunity for healthy dialogue and a mutual understanding and respect. But it took me, it took time and practice and, learning how to communicate, what that even means with intention. And, but once I did, it transformed my relationships and it boosted my own confidence as well. I began to see that expressing myself and setting boundaries and advocating for my needs were acts of self-love and self-respect. And I truly watched it ripple out. So as I moved forward and, learned that the key is to approach these conversations with empathy and openness, seeking to understand just as much as you're seeking to be understood. That's really important because it goes two ways. Boundaries, go both ways. They'll have their boundaries, you'll have yours, and it's important to communicate. So what this mindset does is it nurtures this space in the relationship where both of you can feel heard and respected. So communication becomes that extra partnership, And so when we love ourselves and we're caring for our mental, emotional, physical and spiritual health, this also includes choosing what is healthy for us, the people we surround ourselves with, our environment, what we allow on the inside. That's all part of it. So, it's not all about our own response. Sometimes we're living with someone else where their response becomes toxic to us. So this is a great way to learn about it and then learn how to set some healthy boundaries. So it really is about communicating the healthy boundaries in this particular situation. And setting healthy boundaries is super important for keeping relationships healthy and respectful. Like I said, boundaries let others know how we want to be treated, which helps protect our emotional and mental and sometimes physical health. So let's go over some helpful tips for setting healthy boundaries in case this is something you're interested in. Okay, so first and foremost, know what you want. Before you can tell others about your boundaries, you need to figure out what they are. So think about what you need, what matters to you, and where you draw the line in different parts of your life, like at work, with your partner, with friends, or your personal time, what you want to do with your own personal time. Get a clear picture of what this looks like so you know exactly what you want. And it can be changing too. So remember, boundaries aren't firm. They should be movable in some ways. There are protection boundaries that are very strong and keep you healthy, and they're not really movable. But there are some that we have to be able to grow. And as we learn and we gain new knowledge and we learn different tools and different scenarios, it will cause our boundaries to be a little bit more flexible in some areas. So the next is be direct and clear. When you talk about your boundaries, make sure you're straightforward, and be very specific. If you're vague, it will just lead to misunderstandings, And so instead of saying, I need more space, maybe try saying, I need some alone time on weekends to recharge. Something like that, just a little bit more explanatory. So you don't want to be vague. You just want to say, hey, be honest with yourself and with others, and your timing. So timing is very important. And in this situation, we're talking about someone's reaction or overreaction to certain situations, right? So, and how it makes you feel. So if you're setting a boundary in this particular situation, in the heat of the moment, you probably won't make much progress if you're trying to set a healthy boundary. If they've gone off and they're in that explosive moment, you're not going to want to set a boundary in that moment because they're not going to hear you. Their emotions are blocking anything else from coming in. If they're in that explosive moment, one of the best things you can do is just maybe have a pre-made plan. If they're aware of it, you can have some breathing exercises that will help. If they're not aware of it or they don't want to be aware of it, you can use the breathing, exercises yourself to get you through that until you're in a place where you can communicate in a healthy way. So it's my advice to set aside intentional time to have a conversation with somebody that you care about if they are, if their response is affecting you in that, toxic way. So, but timing is very, very important, so keep that in mind. And use I statements. I statements are really great because, they let you express your feelings without sounding like you're blaming anyone. It keeps the focus on what you're experiencing. So, for example, if, you can say, I feel overwhelmed when I get, work emails after hours, right? Instead of saying something like, you always email me late. Well, you see how that kind of you're not accepting responsibility for your healthy boundaries. You're putting it on somebody else by saying, you always email me late. So instead you would say, I feel overwhelmed when I get work emails after hours. It's very straightforward. You're setting a nice boundary there. It's I think that's kind of a pre-boundary. If they don't follow that, then it's time to say, I will not be answering work emails after hours, period. So it's good to be nice and firm and clear, So next is, I always like to be kind. And so calm and kind is a wonderful place to be. So stay calm and polite when you're talking about your boundaries. It's okay to be firm, but be kind about it, even if it's a tricky subject. This approach will encourage more of an open conversation, and it will make it less likely for the other person to feel a certain way, or maybe get defensive. Maybe there's a way that by keeping calm and kind, you can encourage that, openness. And remember, you're aiming for understanding, not a fight. This is not a confrontation. So don't go in expecting one, and don't go in starting one either with it. So it's very important. That's why that kindness is an important part of your boundary setting. And stick to your guns. Being consistent, it helps reinforce your boundaries. So you have to stick with it. If you're wishy-washy and let them slide, and others might get confused, then they won't take you seriously. So it's important to keep your boundaries firm and, address any pushes or breaches immediately. If you've set a clear boundary with somebody and they keep crossing it or trying to cross it, then it's important that you address it right away. Don't play around, don't wait for it, because that communication is very important. And next is, expect, I wouldn't say expect, that's kind of the wrong word, but be aware there might be some pushback, Not everyone will get or respect your boundaries right away. Some of them don't even know what boundaries are. So if you come at them with some language they don't understand, they're just going to be like, yeah, whatever, So be ready for a little resistance, be prepared for it. Put scenarios together that you know how to calmly respond. And hold your ground. So calmly repeat your boundaries if you need to, and know that it's okay to walk away if they're not respected, So next is, take care of yourself. I'm always going to come back to that too. Talking about boundaries is, can be very emotionally draining. So make sure you're taking the right, doing this work at the right time, taking time to look after yourself and do that self-care and whatever practices you need to prepare yourself, and do things that recharge your energy, keep you feeling good. This will help you stick to your boundaries too. So as you're balanced and you're caring for yourself, you're respecting yourself. That self-respect and that self-love is what keeps our healthy boundaries healthy. So, and last but certainly not least is get some backup. If you feel that, setting boundaries is tough and you're just having a really hard time with it, could be a specific situation or something in general, don't hesitate to reach out. A therapist or a coach or trusted friend. Friends are, friends that respect your boundaries, are really wonderful to seek help from because they understand them. They have them themselves most likely. So they can give you advice and support and a listening ear, as you practice setting and keeping your boundaries. So have that support, that backup system in place. It's really important. Setting healthy boundaries, it helps us grow, and it strengthens our relationships. It makes it easier for us to thrive in this atmosphere that's filled with like mutual respect and mutual love. It's really changed my life. So hopefully this gives you a glimpse into that. I know it's a pretty deep topic. And for those of you who are struggling right now, remember that, change and growth are there. It's a gradual process. Start by acknowledging where you're at. Your feelings, being gentle with yourself as you navigate those feelings, and engaging in practices like journaling and mindfulness and talking with friends or therapy. It can be, extremely beneficial for you. And my hope is that you navigate life's challenges, that your response reflects the strength and resilience and the beauty that's within you. I want your response system to reflect your authentic self. So as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with some words of empowerment that can serve as kind of maybe a guiding light for you on this journey of self-discovery and resilience. And I hope that these words remind you of the strength and the wisdom that you hold within you, So you are resilient. And no matter the challenge, remember you possess a deep well of resilience within you. You have overcome obstacles before, and you have the power to do it again. So trust in your capacity to adapt and grow, because your worth is innate. Your value is not determined by external circumstances or the opinions of others. You're inherently worthy. And this truth remains unshaken, regardless of life's unpredictability. Every challenge is an opportunity. So instead of seeing difficulties as setbacks, you're now viewing them as opportunities for learning and growth. And each challenge is another stepping stone for you on your path to becoming your best self. So continue to choose kindness always. Extend kindness to yourself and to others, especially in moments of tension. Kindness nurtures these connections and understanding that paves the way for healing and beautiful transformation from the inside out. And we can always use more of that. And celebrate those small victories, Acknowledge and celebrate every tiny little step forward, no matter how teeny tiny baby step it is. It's a testimony to your progress and your determination. And my hope is that, as you continue your journey and, let these words of empowerment encourage you. Embrace the unexpected moments with courage now, Work on yourself. Trust in your ability to respond with intention, not just a reaction and emotional overwhelm, because you're capable and you're strong and you're on a path to a more fulfilling and empowered life. I know it and I feel it in my bones. So thank you so much for listening and for joining me on this episode of Harvest Prosperity. I hope this inspires you And if you like it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to get notified when another episode drops. And for holistic coaching support or resources, you can visit harvestprosperity.com. You can also connect with me on Instagram and Facebook at Harvest Prosperity. Until next time, keep nurturing those beautiful seeds of greatness within you.